Hey readers, welcome to the Shelf Addiction Podcast. Thank you for downloading or streaming today's Shelf Byte episode. If you're new here, Shelf Byte features spoiler-free book and audiobook reviews in 5-ish minutes or less. I am your host, Tamara Ford. If you'd like to chat with me about the books reviewed in this episode, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Shelf Addiction. In addition, don't forget, you can always find me in the Shelf Addiction official Facebook group. A quick note before I get started, if you enjoy this show and would like even more content, please consider becoming a Shelf Addiction Patreon subscriber. You'll gain access to exclusive Patreon-only content, including private live streams, unedited video of podcast recordings, stickers, and more based on subscription level. Please go to shelfaddiction.com and click on the Support Us tab. If you'd like to show your support in a non-monetary way, please share this episode with a bookish friend or on your favorite social media space. Let's jump into it. So I thought I would do something a little bit different. This is the first time I've ever done it on a Shelf Byte. And that is why I said this time in about 5 minutes, because I don't know if I'm going to be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but my target is not to hit more than 10 minutes. What I'm doing is I'm reviewing a trilogy as a whole. So instead of reviewing 3 separate books, I decided since the trilogy is finished, I would go ahead and review it as a unit. And the books I'm talking about today are the Chronicles of the One trilogy written by Nora Roberts. The trilogy includes the titles The One, Of Blood and Bone, and The Rise of Magics. I listened to these on audiobook, so we'll be talking about the audiobook version, and it was narrated by Julia Whalen. It was published by Brilliant Audio, and the first book came out December 5th, 2017, and each subsequent title came out about a year after that. So the latest one came out I think it was November 26, 2019. So pretty close to December. The duration of these audiobooks range from 12 hours to 14. These are the unabridged versions. And yes, each book seems to have gotten a little bit longer. There are abridged versions available, which should shave several hours off of your listening time per book. But I do think that if you want the full experience, you should definitely go for the unabridged versions. The genre of these titles are fantasy and dystopian. So if you have not heard about this, this is a really great series based all around dystopian themes, which just means end of the world. And it's a lot of fantasy thrown in. So we have a lot of fantasy creatures. So this trilogy has been on my radar for a while. I originally decided to go ahead and pick this up in December because I needed a book with a New Year's Eve party, and this book had it. It actually started on New Year's Eve. So I'm going to read a little blurb from the first book, and this is from barnesandnoble.com. A stunning new novel from the #1 New York Times bestselling author Nora Roberts. Year One is an epic of hope and horror, chaos and magic, and a journey that will unite a desperate group of people to fight the battle of their lives. And that is pretty spot on for the series as a whole. In my opinion, this was a well-told story of good versus evil. It has common plot devices with a lot of fantasy apocalyptic stories. So we see things that we've seen before. So it's not entirely unique, but I do feel it's well done and well told. And it's a refreshing change of pace if you've kind of been in a rut with, your regular fantasy or post-apocalyptic stories, or even if you just want something different, this is a great option to mix things up. So she does a good job with balancing the seriousness of the situation with the awe of magic. So on one hand, things are really dire and scary, and on the other hand, finding out what these characters can do is kind of wild and exciting to learn how magic develops in this world. So add to that the hardship of war. Our youngest characters are growing up in these hard times. They're finding themselves, they're finding love in these hard times. And it's a ride you'll want to take. With the balance of these things happening, it makes a book that's easy to recommend to a lot of different readers. It's not too heavy on one way or the other. So I think I liked the best in this trilogy the fantastical elements like witches and fairies and shapeshifters, and of course the battle of good versus evil as far as magic. So if there are good witches, there are bad witches. The action scenes were really well done and it had good detail. And I think they were also believable. So while it was fantastical, so you're doing spells and you see things like dragons and, these things are really high fantasy in some ways. It definitely seems realistic. And by that, I mean, there's a lot going on and the hero and the heroine, they have to make hard decisions. You know what I mean? They still have to struggle with death and loss and all of that. So while the fancy dragons and wars are going on with fights and all of that, there is still grounded. But on the flip side, I think if I had to critique something about the war scenes or the battle scenes, I would say that while yes, there is a war, going on behind you in the backdrop, I did not feel that the stakes were high enough for the heroine at times. I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll stop there. So I didn't feel as much drama or as much suspense as I think the author wanted me to feel. So let's talk a little bit about the characters. This series has a huge cast of characters. If you like stories with a lot of characters, then this would be something that is right up your alley. Personally, I like it both ways. If it's done right, a ton of characters can seem just perfect for what's going on. And that is the case here, in my opinion. It starts with a generation of people that are, in their 20s or early 30s, and this plague happens, takes the whole world out. And they're left to scramble and they're left to join each other and they start having kids. Those kids grow up. And of course, the people are fighting the battle, good versus evil. So it really has two generations. So yeah, it's a lot of characters. You start to gather groups of people and growing communities. And yeah, it's a lot. But it wasn't overkill, in my opinion. It was manageable and it was easy to understand. I felt that the world building was strong. I know some people think otherwise, but I didn't have any problem with the world building in book one. I mean, who doesn't like a book where the apocalypse starts from what seems like a plague and it just takes out everybody? In the book, it estimated that, 5 billion people across the planet were taken out. And it all started from like an ancestral home in Dumfries, Scotland, of all places. So, it's like this one little thing in this one little quiet town in this little place. One thing happens and just catastrophe. And that is kind of what apocalyptic things are. It's the end of the world. And, like I said, this isn't a new theme. This isn't a new plot device. We've read lots of things that have plagues that take out the world. But I think that there are enough unique elements in this trilogy to still make it worth the read. I really enjoyed the pacing as well. It did slow down a bit for me here and there in book 3 and maybe a little bit in book 2. But I think it was due to the vastness of the story. The last series that I read that I felt was this fast, actually it was more in depth, more big, was the Justin Cronin trilogy. It was called The Passage. That's what it was. It spanned thousands of years in his trilogy. And this one spanned, 30 years? 15 to 30 years. I don't know exactly, but 15 to 25 years, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of guessing, but around there. But because of the vastness of the story, there's a lot more explanation needed. And yeah, you want the world building to be reliable and thorough. So unfortunately, that does slow down the pace every once in a while, but it wasn't enough to deter me from continuing this story. I want to talk a little bit about the audiobook narrator. Julie Whalen was absolutely excellent. I listened at 1.5 or 1.25, excuse me. I think a little while I did go up to 1.5, but in the end, I just switched it back to 1.25 because her natural cadence did not need to be sped up, that much, even though I do like to listen a little faster. 1.5 was just a tad too fast for me. I listened to this by the pool, by the beachside, on the plane, sitting in the airport. I continued this series when I got back. I was engaged the entire time. I was engaged. The narrator was like the perfect piece to the puzzle. She was so excellent. I know I said excellent already, but she kind of blended into the story. Have you ever had that experience when you're listening and someone's reading the story to you, but eventually that part just kind of dies away and all you hear is the story? She just blended in and it felt really natural for her to be narrating that story. And like I mentioned earlier, these are not short audiobooks by any means, as they go up to 14 hours. But definitely, if you don't have the time to invest in 12 hours, 13, then 14 hours, definitely check out the abridged versions that will help you shave some time off. So I just really was pleasantly surprised by this trilogy. I don't read a lot of Nora Roberts. I started her other series when she was writing, or is, I think she's still writing those books under the J.D. Robb pen name. I started those. I like them fine, but I haven't really read a lot by her. I don't read her romance. I'm not a heavy romance reader, as you guys know. So I didn't know what to expect coming into this, and I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed it. And for that matter, I do think I do think almost everyone would enjoy this book. If you're a fan of dystopian, then you'll like this. If you are a fan with fantasy, you would like this. If you like really big stories with lots of characters and lots of development, then you would enjoy this. Even if you're a romance reader, I think you would enjoy this. There's a little bit of romance, but not a lot. So yeah, and I said a lot, but didn't really say much. I mean, it's really hard to talk about this book in a way that just won't just straight up give away major plot things that are going on. You don't really need to know all of that to know if it's a good book or not, right? So definitely, if you like those themes, you like those genres, definitely give this a try. I would rate this series overall as a 4 out of 5 bookmarks. I actually ended up rating each book 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. So definitely it is a strong 4 for me. It's not perfect. I mentioned a few things that I think could have been tightened up a little bit, like some of the descriptions and some of the lags could have been tightened up a little bit. But, the story is great. The story was fun. It was engaging. It was sad. It was emotional. It was just really easy to devour in a really short amount of time. So I really enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it, if you've read it already, please hit me up on the socials, find me in the Facebook group, and let's talk a little bit about it. I would love to know what you thought of the trilogy. Did you even finish the trilogy? Did you start? Is this on your TBR? All of the above, I'd like to know the answer to. So I'm going to end things there. And until next time, happy reading. Take care, guys.